Introducing the next generation from Nintendo. New Super Mario World. Created especially for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. It's a bit more exciting, a bit more challenging, a bit more graphic, a bit more colorful, a bit more realistic, a bit more levels, a bit more secret, a bit more enemies, a bit more friends, a bit more sound, a bit hotter, a bit cooler, a bit weird, a bit more revolutionary, a bit more Mario, a bit more of what you want. It's 16-bit, and it's yours only if you get new Super Nintendo. Now you're playing with power, superpower.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Dystopian Dance Party podcast. I'm Zach, and this is my co-host, Callie.
Hello.
And we are talking about video games again today, specifically the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, which turns 25 years old sometime around when we're posting this podcast. I looked this up on Wikipedia. The date that they give for North America is August 23rd, 1991, which will be pretty close to when I post this podcast. But I think the official launch date was September 9th, and there are some other reports that say August 13th. Launch dates, especially in America, are hard to nail down for video games in that era. So we're just going to go ahead and say roughly around this time, the Super Nintendo turns 25 years old. So I wanted to talk about the Super Nintendo in particular because obviously I don't want to say that this is when video games peaked, because that's obviously not true. Like I'll be playing games now with my 4-year-old son, and it's like he's so lucky, like what he gets to experience and grow up with now. I don't want to let like nostalgia become like a crutch that doesn't allow me to see like we're living in a pretty great time period now. But I guess the Super Nintendo will always be kind of more special to me than a lot of other systems, for a lot of reasons. Partly nostalgia, but also because I think that the early 90s, at least for console video games, were the time when the medium kind of came into itself to a certain extent. I mean, I think this is something that you said when we were talking about Zelda a couple months ago. I think you said something to the effect of the Super Nintendo was when it felt like games were finally accomplishing what they were trying to do with the previous system, but couldn't really pull off.
i.e. be fun and playable.
Right.
And pretty to look at.
Right. Yeah, it's like if you give if you give an 11-year-old a regular Nintendo game now, unless it's something like, probably Super Mario Brothers 3 they could get into, or even the original Super Mario Brothers, but like you give them, I don't know, Excite Bike or Kid Icarus or Metroid, and they'll be like, what the fuck am I going to do with this? If you give them a Super Nintendo game, they might still be like, what am I going to do with this? But they will be more likely to enjoy it and to understand it.
Well, Remy likes playing Super Mario World, doesn't he?
Yeah, Super Mario World he's terrible at it. But Super Mario World it's still very appealing to look at, and it's still accessible. And that's true of a lot of these games.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know if people who listen to the podcast know. I guess, first of all, I don't know if people listen to the podcast. And then, on top of that, I don't know if they are all aware that you and I are brother and sister, and I'm 7 years older than you. So, 1991, the fall of 1991, when the SNES came out, I was 7 and you were a newborn. You were born in November '91. So obviously our memories are going to be very different. For me, the Super Nintendo is always going to have a special place in my heart just because of how much I wanted it when I was 7. I feel like with pop music, you're kind of always going to love the things, the bands and the songs that you loved when you were 14. And with video games, it's the same thing, but you're always going to love the thing you loved when you were like 7 or 8 years old. And I just distinctly remember, I got an NES pretty late, maybe like 88, 89, I think. I played all of the Mario games, I played the Mega Man games, and I was like, by the time the Super Nintendo came out, I was like into video games. And I had a Nintendo Power subscription, so of course that was hyping up the Super Nintendo. And I just wanted one so bad. It was to the point that my best friend at the time knew that I wanted a Super Nintendo, and probably also that I didn't want to come over to his house, and he lied to me and told me that he had a Super Nintendo like to lure me over to his house. Which is, early evidence of how much of an asshole I am, that it requires being tempted by material goods for me to actually show up and be friends with you. But yeah, I was pissed at the time. I was like, you told me you had a fucking Super Nintendo. Like, obviously, like every time we were at the store, I wanted to play it. I don't even remember what store it was. Like, where did people shop in 1991? It wasn't Target. I don't know.
Kmart probably.
It was probably it was probably Kmart, and we'd always play the display, and they had Super Mario World running, and it was like nothing could be as cool as this. This is like our culture has peaked. Was my feeling at the time.
You've played every Mario game. You conquered every Mario game. You think you've mastered all there is to know about Mario. Well, you better think again. New Super Mario World, made possible by the power of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. You've never faced the challenge of so many enemies, so many obstacles, so many levels. You've never needed help from a dinosaur before. Super Mario World, you get it only with a Super NES. It's part of the growing lineup of games for the next generation from Nintendo. You've got to play it. You've got to have it. You've got a reputation. Now you're playing with power. Super power.
The smallest things were impressive. Super Mario Brothers 3 had come out a year earlier, I think, in the US. So yeah, it was actually a pretty short wait between the two for Americans. The jump was just like unbelievable. I don't think I've ever been as impressed by a leap between systems again. I mean, maybe like PS1 to PS2 would be the closest. But I mean, at the time, I'd never seen anything like it. In Super Mario 3 on the map screen, it's like Mario's just facing forward. It's very static. All the levels are just squares. And Super Mario World, he has like a little animated walk that he does. It actually seems like he's moving through this world. And when you move into a different level, like things change in the terrain. Hills pop up, or when you beat a castle, the castle crumbles, bridges appear. It just like, it's really quaint to look back and think like this used to be impressive, but it was so impressive, and especially for being a kid, it just kind of blew your mind.
And it still looks so nice, especially with the the graphics are so cartoony that they don't seem to age. It still looks like I would look at that if it came out tomorrow on like I don't know, it's downloadable content or something. it would look contemporary to me.
Yeah, the art style is just kind of timeless. Because, again, as good as Super Mario Brothers 3 was, the limitations of it, the color palette, when he took the Fire Flower, his costume would be black and orange. It was just, like, weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because the first version of Super Mario Brothers 3 that I played was the one that came out for the Super Nintendo on Super Mario All-Stars.
Right.
So I've since played the one for the original NES one that came out on, but I've only played on Virtual Console. I've never played on the NES.
Mm-hmm.
But now, even thinking about it now, the graphics that I remember are from the Super Nintendo one, which corrected all the stuff that we're talking about. So, like,
Right.
I'm thinking about it, I'm like, it wasn't black and red, and then I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's why.
Right. So I mean, let's kind of talk about that, like the differences between our early memories, because you never knew a world without the Super Nintendo. You were born, at around the same time, and so for me, like, I'll always remember that Christmas getting it, and there's a video that, obviously, like every family in the early 90s, we would videotape our Christmas mornings, and there's a kind of uncomfortably N64 kid like video of me opening the Super Nintendo. I'm not quite as hysterical as the N64 kid, but it's like, it's just funny. Like I get so excited. And so, like, I just really remember, I actually remember when I opened up the present, when I took the wrapping paper off and I saw the Super Nintendo box, my first thought was, this isn't really a Super Nintendo, it's just the box and they put something else in. So apparently I thought that our parents were horrible.
Yeah, and how would they procure a Super Nintendo box without buying one? And
Right.
that's funny.
Yeah, I was like, this was obviously too good to be true. Like, they're cruelly tricking me, like, was my first thought. And then, just like so excited to be able to play this Super Mario World that I've been, like, poring over magazines and looking at in the store and all that stuff. And I just want to add, this is back in the day when you buy a video game console and it actually comes with, first of all, a game, and it's not like some special bundle or whatever. It's like the game comes with it. It's in the box, it's ready to go. And 2 controllers, like, that's unheard of now. We're lucky if we have, like, the right cable to plug into the TV. So it's like, you get that for Christmas and you're good to go. And you were just born, and I think I probably said some bullshit about how, like, my little sister is the best Christmas present, but that was obviously garbage. It was the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, I was just in the background being swaddled.
Right.
I don't remember any of this.
Yeah. But it was technically also your Super Nintendo, because, the plight of the older sibling is having to share everything with the younger sibling. So it was, even though you were too young to appreciate it, it was actually both of ours.
Yeah, and it's crazy now thinking about it, because how old would I have had to be to remember playing a game? Like, I remember playing Super Mario All-Stars when I was like 3. I remember watching my mom play it, and I remember playing Super Mario World for myself probably when I was like 5, and Legend of Zelda and stuff like that. Now you get to 5 and it's like, you would have already had another game system if it was on the timeline that game systems come out now.
Yeah, and it would have been like, my 4-year-old, I had to train him how to actually play a video game with a controller. Like, the first time, especially because, like, we have the Wii U, And the first time I handed him the controller, he's trying to like tap it because to him that's how you interact with an electronic. So it's so it's like a different world now. To me, the idea of pushing the up button and you move in one direction, pushing left and right, B is jump, like all that stuff is just like second nature, and it's not that way anymore. It's so weird. So I don't remember exactly how old you were, but I remember you were like 3 or 4 maybe, and you would always call Super Mario World Yoshi Eats the Apples. Like that's how you knew that game.
Because that was the most important part of the game. Right. That Yoshi can eat apples that have absolutely no consequence within the game.
Right. Well, you eat like 5 of them, you get a mushroom or something. It's kind of a waste.
You have to eat more than 5.
Yeah.
It's just cute, but you do it automatically, so it's not like.
But that's one of those cool like little touches. I'm sure, I don't know if I was specifically impressed by that at the time, but I'm sure it was kind of impressive that you could interact with the environment to even that degree, because it on the Nintendo, everything that you saw on the screen other than your character and like obstacles or enemies was background. It was just like it was like if it was a movie, just a painted backdrop on the set. It wasn't at all interactive, with some exceptions. I'm just remembering the part in Mario 3 where you can go behind it. But yeah, to one of those early levels in Super Mario World, the first time you're like running on Yoshi, and he just like eats the apple as you walk past it. It's a cool little moment. It's like, oh, I didn't know you could do this.
Is Super Mario World, is that the first time we see Yoshi?
Yeah.
In the Mario universe? Okay.
Yeah.
I see. That is always going to be one of my favorite games. Like, I love how you can, isn't there a way to get Blue Yoshi before you go up to Star Road? Can't you, like, finish a level by flying, and then at the end, you just get to keep Blue Yoshi, or am I?
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. There's a lot of secrets, in that game. And so, yeah, I think there is, like, Butter Bridge, one of those, where you can fly up in the, you get the wings and you fly up into the special area, and basically if you survive to the end, you have Blue Yoshi. I think you're right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's always surprising, just because you do that and then you just assume that the level is going to be over, and then you come out and the Yoshi is blue. I think that's how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton of secrets. Like, that was kind of... It wasn't the first Mario that introduced... like I just mentioned, in Mario 3, there's the level early in the game where you can crouch and fall behind the scenery, and, there's like a secret exit. So there was definitely a precedent. And, even the first Mario, there's like the warp zone and all of that. So there's a precedent for secrets in these games, but Mario World was really the one that like took it to the next level. There's whole levels that you can't get to without finding a secret exit, and part of the fun of the game is like sort of unlocking everything and finding everything. And I want to say that this was the first Mario that gave you like a percentage on your save file, so like how much you've discovered. And I'm sure that I've 100%ed it Not recently. I've really lost a lot of my skill. But when I was a kid, I know that like, after you find the exits, you find the secret entrances to like Star Road, and then you make your way through Star Road, and then there's the bonus level with all the stages that are called like Groovy and Tubular and stuff like that. And
right, I was gonna say there's like secrets on top of secrets on top of secrets.
Yeah, and those levels are hard as shit. And I know that back then I beat them, but I don't think I could now.
Yeah, I was just recently trying to beat them. Because I re-downloaded it on the Virtual Console, and I don't think I did. I got all through Star Road, and I was on the secret levels, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because they're like insanely hard. I think Tubular is the biggest bitch that I...
Is that the one where it's like it's all like precision jumping? You have to make these long jumps. Like between the guys throwing the baseballs and stuff.
I don't even remember. I think I blocked it out.
That's the one that I always think about.
I just remember hating it and giving up.
Right, exactly. We had more patience when we were kids than
I
we do
didn't,
now.
But I have more skill, but the same amount of patience. That's the only reason I got to where it was.
And I have less patience and less skill. But yeah, I think Super Mario World, there's always the eternal debate is whether Mario 3 or Mario World is better. And
it's Mario World.
Yeah, I love both of them, but to me it's like there's no contest. Like the levels in Mario World are so big and detailed, and there's the secret, and it's just so rewarding. It's just like a beautiful work of art.
Yeah, I just love the graphics. Like, I love even just like the way the ground looks and stuff like that. Or I'm thinking about when you go into the cave and there's that weird dinosaur monster that comes out of the lava. Just like little things like that you don't expect, and it just looks really cute. I don't really remember ever seeing a style like that before or after. Like other Mario games, the newer ones are now in 3D obviously, and they kind of look like that, like very highly colorful and things like that, but that particular style of Mario has never been done again in the series.
Everything is so like handcrafted and has such personality. Like, like you said, I mean, the new Mario games, they're still very cute and cartoony and appealing to the eye, but something about them being 3D rendered it's lost a little bit of the personality that the sprites in especially Mario World had, because that somebody like actually drew. It's almost like cell shading animation versus computer animation. Somebody actually drew everything in that game. Like every asset was individually created. And especially with the new Super Mario Brothers games, which can feel very like prefabricated, like, here's some assets, let's use them as building blocks, that kind of a thing. Mario World feels much more artisanal, if you will. Just something about, the art style and the music and the care with which the levels were designed. It's just a super special game. And God, what an amazing game to like launch a system with. I mean, nowadays, the video games that come out at the time a system comes out, they're very rarely any good, basically. and Mario World was like, it was great. It was the best way to introduce that system.
Yeah, it still might be my favorite game on the Super Nintendo.
So yeah, we had Mario World. One thing I'm gonna say is, obviously we were kids when the Super Nintendo came out, and while I had a Nintendo Power subscription, I was not necessarily like trying to play everything. When you're a kid, you just kind of play whatever ends up in your, whatever you get for Christmas, whatever you rent. There's not like you're not thinking about, oh, I've got to play the Super Nintendo canon. So I mean, there's a lot of like really popular, really famous Super Nintendo games that I did not play at the time. I didn't play Pilot Wings. I didn't play F-Zero. I like, I played Mario Kart, but I don't think I ever owned it. Even stuff like Super Metroid, which is considered one of the like classics from the system, I did not play until I owned a Wii. It was decades later that I actually played that game. So this is not going to be an exhaustive recollection of the system. It's very, our experience with it was very kind of idiosyncratic, and just these are the games that we played. But that's kind of part of what makes that era fun. I feel like there wasn't as much pressure to like play everything. Like nowadays, I feel like there's too many video games. Like there's all this stuff that I'm supposed to be playing, and it's just overwhelming. I don't have time. I think maybe part of it was because there weren't as many games back then, and part of it was because I was 7. But it's like I just played what I played, and that's it. I didn't worry about the rest. But I'm trying to remember like the second game I got. It might have been Street Fighter 2.
I said this in the Legend of Zelda podcast. I don't remember games coming in the house or out of the house. I just remember them being there and playing them. Like, it's like I just don't remember ever going to buy a game or any of that. I just remember them being in the house.
It's gotten really hazy with me too. Yeah, I had Street Fighter 2. I think that came out around 92. I've never liked fighting games that much, so I don't know how or why I ended up with Street Fighter 2. But I just know that I had it, and I remember that one. That was like, it pissed me off because I had the original version, and then they came out with like all of these other like improved versions. They did Championship Edition, and they did Super Street Fighter 2, and like, so I'd go over to a friend's house and they'd have like the better version with more characters. But games were like $70 back then, and I didn't like I didn't like Street Fighter enough to buy a new game. It just always kind of chafes that like I didn't have the best version.
How much were games for real back then?
They were anywhere from $50 to $80, basically. So the weird thing about games at that time is the format wasn't standardized like it is now. Like you buy a PS4 game or an Xbox One or a Wii U game, and a Blu-ray disc is a Blu-ray disc. There's no difference in the medium. But with the Super Nintendo, everything was chips. So different cartridges had different chips inside that could cost varying amounts. So like Chrono Trigger, for example, was like $80, but another game that maybe isn't as big, doesn't need as much memory, would be much less. So it's kind of weird to think that was ever the case, and B, that like consumers were okay with that.
Right.
Because now it's like if a game costs more than $60, it's like, what's the deal? Like, why?
Right.
So yeah, games were expensive, which is another reason why we didn't play them all, but we rented a lot. That was kind of the compromise. And I remember, going to the store and renting, like, we rented some stupid games. Like,
we mostly rented stupid games.
Exactly.
Because I would keep renting the same dumb games over and over again. I rented Boogerman like 50 times. I don't know why. It's not even a good game. It sucks. I just thought it was funny. Like, you can literally not... I never saw more than the first, like, 2 levels, which, to be fair, are long as fuck, and they both look the same.
Right.
Like, exactly the same. The game is the same goddamn game for at least half of it. And, yeah, I don't know why I kept renting it. It's horrible. So I wasted, like... If I had the same, like... If I was as cognizant of, like, my time and mortality as I am now, I would not be renting Boogerman over and over again when I was, like, 5 or whatever. I'm, like, mad about it now. I'm like, I wasted all that time. I could have been, like, taking piano lessons or something. Instead of playing fucking Boogerman.
Yeah, there was Boogerman. I remember renting a video game adaptation of the Japanese TV show Ultraman, which was borderline unplayable. It was like a fighting game, and you would be Ultraman, and you would fight these big, like, kaiju monsters. Like, looked like Godzilla, but wasn't actually. At least I don't think it was actually Godzilla.
I don't remember that one. I remember, obviously, Goof Troop, which is another weird one because, I mean, I would watch Goof Troop just because it was on TV, but I wasn't, like, a Goof Troop fan. Why the fuck were we running the Goof Troop game?
Yeah, I never really watched. I don't remember. I mean, I'm sure I saw an episode of Goof Troop, but I was not seeking it out. Even, like, I was more of a Rescue Rangers fan than I ever was a Goof Troop fan.
Well, I watched it, but I don't think I even then liked it enough to be like, oh, a Goof Troop game. This will be fun.
I think we rented that one a lot because it was 2-player simultaneous, which was pretty rare back then.
Yeah, but
you
playing
ruined
with
it.
me 2-player simultaneous is not fun.
Yeah, it was not a selling point.
Like, I feel like 2-player simultaneous is fun when it, like, maybe the siblings are about the same age,
right,
and one of them isn't an asshole. Neither of which were the cases.
Right.
When we rented it.
Or, if like I play Super Mario 3D World with Remy, and he's terrible at it. Like, half the time he's, like, jumping off the side of the screen, and I'm the one actually advancing the level.
Yeah.
So sometimes that it's like riding a 2-person bicycle. Like, one person does all the work, but you both get to the end.
Yeah.
Goof Troop is not like that. Goof Troop is it's basically like a puzzle game. It disguised as a top-down, almost looks like it would be Legend of Zelda style because it's from the top down. But the way to advance through a level is you have to, try to get from one room to the next, and a lot of that involves kicking boxes that go in different, linear directions in a very precise order and pattern. And so we would play me and my mom and you and our mom and you all alternating, between like playing 2-player, but like one of us is taking turns. And my mom and I would always, like, we'd figure out the puzzle, we'd set up the room perfectly so that, we just have to make these moves and then we can get through. You would immediately go in, kick the box directly at one of us, because that's the other thing about Goof Troop. It's one of the games that you could that you could hurt the other player. Like, some games that are 2-player simultaneous, like, you're basically invincible, so you can't really fuck with each other. That game, you can hurt each other, and that is literally always what you would do.
It was so funny when I remember when because I was always the youngest one, like Goofy's son, which is I won't get into the logistics of Goofy having a child, but I would always kick the box, and I remember like for some reason it was so that's why I was doing it, because I was an asshole and it was funny to watch him kick it into something and have everybody get mad. But he would kick it, and like just like the motion of his foot kicking the box was hilarious. And then you guys would get mad, and it was like the mixture of those things together was just like it was hilarious to me. And that's why I did it. That's why I ruined all those puzzles.
Yeah, but we definitely beat that game. We
I think that was because Mom took control. It was you and Mom. We were like, you just watch.
Right.
We're done with this.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about Goof Troop. Except my favorite thing about Goof Troop is that it was directed by the same guy who later went on to direct the Resident Evil series, Shinji Mikami. Speaking of like stupid games that you could hurt each other in, do you remember Joe and Mac with the two cavemen?
Oh God. Yeah, I think so. I either play. Do we have that, or do we just rent it?
So we rented it, and then I bought it, and I, for the life of me, don't know why I decided that was.
Oh my God! Yep, the dinosaur one.
Yeah, that was actually.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was one of the first games I ever. That might have been the second game I got. It was.
It came out in '91.
Yeah, I think that might have been the second Super Nintendo game I owned. From Super Mario World to Joe and Mac.
Yeah, I remember that one. I obviously, like, my memories of a lot of Super Nintendo games, especially the ones that I haven't played again as a teenager or an adult, are just like remembering the graphics.
Right.
And parts of it that I like. So, like, I never advanced in Joe and Mac.
Right.
But I just remember, like, the way that the graphics looked and, like, the shading on the dinosaurs and stuff.
Yeah.
And part of that, it helps that I'm looking at it again, but I remember playing that when I was little and liking it because, like, that's why I would play it. Mm-hmm. Not so I would advance in the game, but so that I could look at the dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm. I think that's why everybody played it. Like, that was the selling point of that game was, I mean, it was a really, like, simple arcade-style game. I think it was based on an arcade game. And one of the early selling points of the Super Nintendo was that you could finally get like arcade style graphics at home, you know, and Joe and Mac was a really impressive looking game at the time. Like the dinosaurs were huge, the sprites were really big and like detailed, especially for 1991. And the game was passable. It was playable.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's about all I have to say about it. But you could I think I do remember a lot of like antagonistic two-player with us just wailing on each other.
I don't at all. I mean, I'm sure it happened. But...
Right.
Do you remember I remember you having ClayFighter.
Oh, I did own ClayFighter.
Yeah, and my main memory of that is Mom being like, you can't play that. So I never played it. I don't know why. Like, was it violent? It had blood, I guess.
I guess. Yeah, Mom was kind of weird. Like, I was never allowed to watch Power Rangers when I was a kid. Like, Mom had a weird line for violence. You know, on the one hand, I wasn't allowed to watch Power Rangers when I was 9. On the other hand, you know, I went to see Tim Burton's Batman in the theaters when I was 4. You know, like, so there were some weirdly arbitrary rules in our house.
Yeah, I never watched The Simpsons.
Right,
but
yeah, me neither.
Else watched The Simpsons.
Yeah, exactly.
So now, like, even to this day, like, everyone loves The Simpsons, but I don't give a shit because I never saw it. So I'm just like, it's too late now to get into it, so fuck it.
Exactly, yeah. Everybody's like, this, you know, that Simpsons episode? And I'm always like, no, it's just, like, not part of my...
Right.
But yeah, I forgot all about ClayFighter. It's weird. Like, I've never liked fighting games. Why did I own 2 fighting games? One of which was ClayFighter. I mean, at least Street Fighter is like a classic, you know?
I remember you playing ClayFighter occasionally. Obviously, I couldn't watch it. I remember like little parts of it. Like I remembered some of the graphics, and like, wasn't there just a character who was like a blob of clay?
Probably.
Or like goo or something.
I mean, there was a snowman.
Oh yeah, here I'm looking at the characters. Blob, a blob of clay. Exactly how I remembered him.
Self-proclaimed master of Goo-Jitsu. I remember the Elvis one.
I just remember the goo and the snowman.
Yeah. Yeah, that game was not very memorable, but you know, it was like at the time it was very cool to see, like that was a later Super Nintendo game, so it was really cool to see like 3D rendered characters when you're used to just like flat sprites, and that was the whole reason why ClayFighter existed. Another earlier one that I probably got, you know, toward the beginning of having the Super Nintendo was Castlevania IV, which until very recently was the only Castlevania game I was ever actually able to beat. At the time, though, it was way too hard for me. But, you know, the music is great. Again, the graphics were very cool. Even just that first level where you're, like, approaching the castle and you can, you know, open a door and go behind the gate and kind of, like, be in the background. You know, there are similar tricks in Super Mario World where, like, you're on one side of the cage and then you punch it and you're on the other side. Like that, I remember being really impressed by that. And the music is great, as it always is in Castlevania games. I guess one thing we should probably talk about that was like a selling feature of the Super Nintendo was it was able to like scale sprites so that it looked like they were rotating. They called it Mode 7, and I feel like, for me at least, the most memorable implementation of that was in Super Castlevania IV, because there was a level where the whole castle, or the whole like stage would rotate, and you would start on the floor, and then you'd have to like hold on to a like a hook with your whip, and then the screen would rotate and the floor would become the ceiling or whatever. That was really cool at the time.
I vaguely remember that game. I don't have any good memories of it though. I only really remember the games that I was either interested in watching you playing or that I played myself, so... Yeah. Castlevania IV was not one of those. Because they're so dark. I was probably only really interested in the colorful games.
Yeah, that was definitely like an older looking game. It wasn't as like interesting, I think, to young kids.
Or me, because I'm still not that interested in Castlevania games. I still have the exact same palette for
right,
like everything that I did when I was little.
What's the next, like, other than Mario World? What's the next thing you remember the most?
Next, probably Super Mario All-Stars.
He's back. He's here. He's Mario. He's the new Mucho Mario in Super Mario All-Stars. So much Mario, it's a Mario's smorgasbord. It's all the wigged-out Mario adventures you've ever played and then some. This is juiced up 16-bit only on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, so it's awesome Mario. In-your-face Mario. It's Raccoon Mario. Mario throwing fireballs. Mario hurling turnips. 4 games, including the new Lost levels. Mario like you've never seen him. What's 2 plus 2? Mario, capital of Ohio, Mario. You're going to live, breathe, eat, sleep Mario. 4 Mario games, including the never-before-seen
Which was just
Lost
that
levels.
collection of all the old NES Mario games, but redone so that they are on the Super Nintendo, and they updated the graphics, because that one had the original Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 2, which was just like the one that's not really the second one. It was the second one in America. But then the Lost Levels was also on that, so like they get the whole spectrum of all the Mario games up to the third. The third one was the last one that was on that compilation.
Yeah, it was. It was just 1, 2, 3 and Lost Levels.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I say just like, I mean, especially back then, that was like an amazing deal. You know, we bought like, I mean, Mario 1 came with our Nintendo, and we never actually bought Mario 3. We just rented it a million times. But I mean, we bought Mario 2 for probably like $50 or something. Just
Did we?
Mario 2.
I don't remember having Mario 2. Did we really?
Yeah,
have
we owned Super Mario Brothers 2. It might have been a gift from it might have been a gift from like our grandma or something. I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's just like it's those games were not that old at that point, and it was amazing that you could get them all on the same cartridge with updated graphics, and yeah, I mean that was crazy. Looking back now, I don't love all of the like artistic decisions. Like I feel like especially the first and second games had like a certain a feel on the regular Nintendo that kind of lost some of the personality when it was translated to, you know, the wider color palette and the more detailed sprites and stuff like that. That being said, I still love All Stars.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have that reference. Well, actually, I'd played the originals. Didn't we have the original Mario for NES? Mm-hmm. So I'd probably played that and could recognize that there was a difference in the graphics. But like Super Mario 3, that was just how it looked until I recently bought it on Virtual Console, and I was like, this looks different. And then I remembered that I had the updated graphics.
Yeah. My favorite thing about Mario All-Stars is the beginning where, you know, like the screen before you press start, where it's dark and it's a silhouette, and they like make it so that it sounds like the characters are talking to each other, and then like the lights come on. That's just always stuck out in my head.
Oh yeah, I remember that sound. All of the intro sounds to all the Super Nintendo games are like, I really remember them. Like
Yeah.
I always remember the music from A Link to the Past. And the noise it made when you like push start or whatever. Mm-hmm. I remember Super Mario All-Stars, and then EarthBound.
Yeah.
Is really memorable too. The music that begins EarthBound.
Yeah, EarthBound had the best just sound effects in general.
Yeah, everything, like, I own the soundtrack to EarthBound. I'll just listen to it.
That's one of those games that, like, it came out in '95, so it was later. You know, that's pretty close to when the Nintendo 64 came out, and it was apparently, you know, like I was a kid, and the only gaming news that I read was Nintendo Power, which obviously isn't going to say like this game isn't selling well, you know. So I didn't know at the time that nobody was really buying EarthBound, and it was like this cult game. Like, I adored that game. That was such a like, it just connected with me so much. And so now, especially knowing like how few people originally bought it, when I meet somebody who had it growing up, it's like an instant connection, you know?
Right. Not many people do either. Like, I've met a few people, but like when I was growing up, nobody knew about EarthBound.
Right.
So it's weird because I feel like it's such a good game. Like, it's shocking to me that not many people bought it, because it's my favorite game overall ever. Mm-hmm. Like, I played it so many times. There was a period of time when I would just play it like every year, and that was probably one of the first games I played by myself. Mm-hmm. And it was easy to play for a little kid because like the battle scene, there was nothing really special you had to do. You just push it. Like you could either like hit them with your bat or whatever, mm-hmm. and it would just say bash, or you go over to magic and there were only a few magical commands. So everything was really easy and the text was big. And I really liked for some reason I liked the battles, probably because I liked the art style, mm-hmm. and then in the background it was just a design. It was almost like a Zen-like thing, and then I liked the battle music. So I think it's probably the only accessible role-playing game for like little kids.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, there is strategy, but it's pretty basic, and it's sort of like Pokemon, I guess, in a way, where there's strategy, but you can also just power level and like brute force your way through the game, you know? Right. And so it's not like Final Fantasy or something where eventually you're going to hit a wall and you're going to get to a point where you need to like know how to buff your characters or deal with status effects or whatever. I mean, all of that stuff is in EarthBound, but you can also just kind of like force your way through the game. And so, yeah, it is kind of like a perfect, kids RPG.
Yeah, and that was the first game I played. I would only play up until like Threed, mm-hmm. and then be like, all right, I'm not interested in this anymore, because I liked Tucson and Happy Village and Threed. Mm-hmm. And those were the three towns I liked. And then after that, Forsyth, it was like, meh. That's when it starts to get kind of boring, I think, because you're in a big city and it just looks like a big city. It's not as interesting as having a town that's all blue and everyone's a zombie, or like purple and everyone's in a cult or something. Like, I was interested in like the really like kind of deeply disturbing parts of the game. It's like having a cult. Everyone in the town is in a cult, and a girl has been kidnapped. That's kind of disturbing.
Right.
Looking back.
It's kind of like, I did appreciate how like different it was at the time, but when you really put it into perspective, you know, I mean, it was an RPG that wasn't about like dragons and magic. It was, you know, just kind of like everyday life.
Yeah, I love that you ate cookies and hamburgers.
Right.
And you just talked to regular people. You were in like you bought stuff from a shopping mall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it had that like quirky sensibility and sense of humor. It was so kind of weird. You know, the enemies were bizarre. There was like Master Belch and all of those guys.
The tent is really weird. Like, you're fighting a tent.
Right. Yeah, and it's like, you know, so at the time, it's like, if you're just kind of, when you're a kid, you tend to just kind of maybe consume things uncritically, and obviously it made an impression on us. But when you look at it compared to the other games that were out, and even just other games in general, like, there's still nothing like EarthBound. And it's just such a special game. And one of the things that was great about the Super Nintendo is it felt like more kind of quirky stuff was coming out than I at least remember on the original NES. Like we got EarthBound, which is actually it's a sequel in Japan. We didn't get the original game Mother on the NES, and I think just in general, like that was kind of when localization was starting to maybe loosen up a little bit. Early on, there was like games for the NES kind of tried to disguise the fact that they were from Japan. So you'd get like Castlevania or Contra or whatever would have these like really super Western looking boxes. The box art would be like really westernizing the characters. Mega Man obviously being the worst offender. But I feel like when the Super Nintendo came out, there was maybe a little less of an effort to Americanize games. Obviously games got even more openly Japanese, like with the PlayStation and stuff like that. But I mean, we rented like Legend of the Mystical Ninja, and eventually bought it actually, and that's like such a Japanese game. Other than the fact that they named the characters Kid Ying and Dr. Yang.
Even that is kind of Japanese in that it's kind of racist against Chinese people.
Right. Yeah, in keeping with the grand tradition of racism against the Chinese.
Right. That game, we bought that. Didn't we buy that like after we had the PlayStation?
It's definitely possible.
Because that was late. Because I remember we bought it because you had sold Super Mario All-Stars actually. So I remember we rebought Super Mario All-Stars and at the same time got Mystical Ninja. And that's when I remember playing Mystical Ninja was way later. Which is another, that was a game we could both play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would usually get in each other's way, but...
Yeah, but by then I was old enough to not play like I played Goof Troop at least, so... like I remember being able to at least like somewhat legitimately play it and want to advance.
That's true, yeah. The problem with that game was it was hard.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was impossible, and then it had the stupid password system, obviously, and it was one of those fucking passwords that's like a paragraph of just gibberish. So it's like, how the fuck am I supposed to remember this? Like, have a even like passwords that you put in to protect your bank account are shorter than the goddamn Mystical Ninja passwords. There's no reason that it should be that long.
Yeah, so you're like, is that an L or an I? Yeah, it's like you lose all of your progress because you wrote down the wrong password, or you couldn't remember, or you couldn't read your own handwriting.
Or it's just too goddamn long, and you don't want to be spending your time putting that. Like, let me look up how long these passwords are because I might be fabricating this a little.
It was like a screen.
Yeah, that's what I'm remembering. But I remember really liking the graphics. It was kind of similar to Mac and Joe. Actually, like that same shading style.
Yeah,
like
big,
very Super Nintendo.
Yeah, really like taking advantage of being able to have these large, colorful sprites. Yeah, I love that game. I wish I was. I've tried to beat it. I've gotten farther. The farthest I've gotten is like the castle. There's a castle with like all of these robot ninjas.
Oh God, I remember that.
That's as far as I've gotten.
Yeah, I remember that level. It's terrible.
Are there any other games you wanted to make sure we talked about?
Probably, well, like the Squaresoft games.
Yeah. Yeah, that was honestly, if I had to choose like one, Earthbound is like super important, obviously, but I think at the time the games that were the most important to me were the Final Fantasy games and Secret of Mana and Chrono Trigger. Like, looking back, it's crazy how on fire Squaresoft was, really through the PlayStation era. Like those like early '90s were like the glory years, but the Super Nintendo era especially, it's crazy. And those were the games that really made me kind of appreciate video games as an art form, I guess. That really made me feel like, okay, this is this is a story that feels significant and meaningful to me, and is like moving me in a way that a book or a film would.
Yeah, again, like, I would only really play the beginning parts of all of these games. So the only part I remember I've since bought the DS version of Chrono Trigger and played further. I never beat it, but I played further in it since then. But I remember like the beginning where you're in the market, and that's all I remember. That's like all I would play is when you give her the pendant, and then I would just stop playing. Mm-hmm. But I played that a few times, and I remember going into that tent where there's that floating head with the hands, and he makes that laugh. Mm-hmm. That's what I remember of Secret of Mana. Chrono Trigger. Right. Secret of Mana, I remember playing the beginning with all the little rabbits things, like the rabbit that look like water balloons.
Yeah, or like Kirby.
Yeah, but then when you cut them, they like explode and it looks like water. So I remember that part. But I recently, I don't know, it was when Lemmy was a kid, so it was like 8 years ago or something. I recently beat that. Mm-hmm. So I went through the whole game, and it was really fun. The things I didn't like about it were that in order to power up your magic, you had to use every spell in order to power it up. So there were parts that I was just like in a forest, like seeking out enemies and just using the same spell on them over and over again. Or like healing, I would just like stand in one place and keep healing myself. So that's just irritating. Like,
right.
That, and then I remember the last boss being really irritating too, because like I think I never beat it. It's this big ass dragon, I think, or something. And I got to the very end, couldn't beat the boss, tried it like 4 times, and I was just like, fuck this. So I just looked it up on YouTube. And that's how I saw the end of Secret of Mana. So it was like, life is too short.
There's a couple of like, just like stupid hard, like difficulty walls in that game. I remember the last time I tried to play it, it was like, I made it to the castle where everybody's brainwashed and the wall comes to life.
Yeah.
Something about in Squaresoft games, if a wall comes to life, watch the fuck out, because it's going to be like the hardest boss in the game. Because like,
you know what's
Final
weird?
Fantasy...
I remember having trouble with that, but I don't remember having too much trouble with that.
It's
I
weird.
think it was probably because I spent so much goddamn time in the forest leveling up my magic. I think you had to do that.
Yeah, probably. I think I probably did just need to grind. If they ever move it over, like, I don't, now that I have the Wii U and not the regular Wii, I don't want to have to go into, like, you have to do that thing where, like, you trick the Wii U into thinking it's a Wii, and then you go to the Wii Virtual Console, and just, like, I want to be able to play it on the gamepad. And unfortunately, I don't think Secret of Mana is ever going to come out. I feel like if it was going to come out on the Wii U Virtual Console, it would have happened by now. So hopefully someday I'll actually finish that game. But it other than a couple of like stupid parts, it's really fun. It's beautiful. Like, that's another game that, like, it's just so gorgeous still to this day.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's like, it was fun getting to the end. It was just the ending I didn't want to fuck with. But like up until that point, like I remember that part where you're in the snow was really beautiful, and then there's a part where it's like a fairy world. Like I really remember a lot of those levels, and obviously this is when I was older, but I was playing on our Super Nintendo with the game that we had when I was little.
Yeah.
So I never played it on Virtual Console. I don't.
Yeah. Santa Claus is in that game, right?
I believe so. Yeah. I think that's in the winter level.
Right, and Moogles. Any game with Moogles is worth my time.
Yeah, it's a really cute game, and I just wish the boss wasn't such a like. It's not even that it's difficult. Like, it's not a boss that's like there are some enemies even in like other Final Fantasy games that are super difficult, but I'm like, okay, I can understand why I'm not doing this. This was just like, it was just dumb. No, it wasn't even that it was hard. It was that it was tedious as fuck and hard.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not even fun or strategy at this point. Like, I remember I just recently played that game on the DS. What game was that? Where you keep going back in time.
Oh, Radiant Historia.
Yeah, I played Radiant Historia, and there were those parts with the huge spiders. Those were incredibly difficult and tedious, but it was like I could see the end. This was like, I was sitting there and it was like a half hour, an hour. I'm still doing the same damn thing. I'm dying, and I'm about to have to do this boss again. And I'm just like, this is not even fun at this point. Why am I doing this? And when it gets to that point, I don't see the point. And it sucks that that's the last boss. So that's the last memory I have of the game. And then the game ends, and it's like, okay, well, you're done. Credits. No, I want like an extra level or something after doing that kind of bullshit. So I'm glad I just watched the video, because it was not worth it.
Probably my favorite. I go back and forth between Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy III / Final Fantasy VI. Those two games, like I can't choose between them because they were both so good in such different ways.
Which one was that? Was that one with the pirate lady?
That was 5. Final Fantasy
okay.
III / 6 was. That was the one with...
with the big, with the, at the beginning, you're the lady with the blue hair and the ponytail, and there's the...
Yeah, the Magitech armor.
Yeah, that was sweet. That was like the that's the kind of aesthetics that I like to see from Final Fantasy games. Because that reminded me of Final Fantasy VII, too. It's like that weird, like, post-apocalyptic machines, but also kind of medieval.
Right. Yeah, it was like before steampunk was a thing that people knew about and be annoying. The Final Fantasy III was steampunk.
Right.
That game just sparked my imagination so much. I think, honestly, gun to my head, I think Chrono Trigger might be the better game, but Final Fantasy III is the one that has kind of like meant the most to me. I was like 10 years old when it came out, and I just remember, just the world just engaged me so much. We used to go to Greenfield Village, and like the like factory area would remind me of like being in Final Fantasy III world. So I used to love like playing in that area that looked like a factory. It's my sad childhood where like all of my like fantasies and imagination are from video games that I would sit at home and play.
Well, it's funny because like even now I'll see or hear things that'll be like EarthBound. Like you can't escape from it, especially EarthBound more than any other Super Nintendo game. It's like it's a part of me in a way that is inseparable. Like I would be a different person if I hadn't played EarthBound. a completely different person, which is kind of unsettling. But I mean, it's not that much different than, you know, there's musicians. I know we talked about like David Bowie. Mm-hmm. I would be a different person if I hadn't heard David Bowie. Mm-hmm. EarthBound has made easily as much of an influence on my life as David Bowie.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like influenced my sense of humor and like aesthetic sensibilities, and I would say the same thing for Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger too. You know, those kinds of games really like moved me and shaped me in ways that other sort of more legitimate works of art also did. And that's kind of what I associate the Super Nintendo with, is that's when, to me, video games were kind of like elevated to an art form that could compete with things like film and literature. I don't think I have anything else specifically to say about Squaresoft.
I don't either. And the only other game I can think of to talk about is Donkey Kong, and I don't really have too much else to say about that, except like, same thing. The art style was cool. I remember playing the first few levels. Right. I remember getting a little bit further in it with Mom, but I don't remember too much else about it, and I like the music. Which is music. Like, just put those 4 points with literally every other game I've talked about, and you'll have the entire podcast.
But I mean, the sound chip on the Super Nintendo was great. That's one of the reasons why we keep mentioning the music, because like it just sounded so good. So like the Final Fantasy games had this almost like orchestral sound that really helped make it like this is serious, this is important, you know.
Final Fantasy music is, I think Final Fantasy music is where I gained my appreciation of music, actually. Like,
yeah, I mean, I didn't
the music in those games.
Right. I still don't listen to classical music, but I will fuck with some Nobuo Uematsu, like.
Right. Yeah, I love that music. And I mean, I won't talk about Final Fantasy VII too much because that's a different platform, but like, Final Fantasy VII soundtrack is my shit. That's like the main thing I miss about that game.
Yeah, and Castlevania had that great like jazz fusion, progressive rock kind of thing. Donkey Kong Country also had kind of like a jazzy, sort of a little bit like, it's not really like hip hop, but sort of like chilled out like electronic music kind of vibe. That felt very contemporary. That had a great soundtrack. And obviously the graphics, again, like ClayFighter, it was super impressive to see like rendered graphics on the Super Nintendo. And now, of course, we know, it was a trick. They rendered graphics on a much more advanced computer and then turned it into sprites that you could play with. But it was cool looking. I remember one of my friends when I was a kid being like, "This is the best that video games will ever look."
What, for Donkey Kong Country?
For Donkey Kong Country, yeah.
That would have been amazing. In some alternate dimension, that's true.
That is true, yeah. That's like it's just Donkey Kong. They could do no
Donkey
better.
Kong is the pinnacle of just everything.
Right, but in that alternate dimension, the twist is that everyone looks like Donkey Kong Country, so that's actually photorealism.
Yeah, it's Planet of the Apes.
Right.
It's not only just like graphic quality, they're also all apes.
So yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really have anything else necessarily to highlight either. Mario Paint was a lot of fun. That's the only other game I can really remember that we had. Oh, Yoshi's Island was
Oh
great.
yeah, Yoshi's
Yeah.
Island was like I still love that game. That's another game that, like Super Mario World, it could come out tomorrow and it would look contemporary just because the graphics are timeless.
Yeah, and they have that hand-drawn feel that I mean,
Right.
that's one of my favorite like video game aesthetics is it looks like something real, and the Yoshi series has since Yoshi's Island, those games have done that pretty consistently. So like yeah, Yoshi's Island, everything looked hand-drawn or like colored pencils or crayons kind of a look. Yoshi's
Yoshi's Story was like a pop-up book.
Yeah, exactly. And now there's Yoshi's Epic Yarn, where everything looks, crafted with yarn and real life materials.
Yeah, I love that. Yoshi's Island was another game that I could play with Mom. Like she was the one that liked that one specifically, and so I would play with her. And I think we beat it a few times actually. That was probably the first game I beat as a kid. With minimal help from anyone.
Yeah, I love that game, and that came out I remember it came out in the fall of 1995, and I remember it because around the same time, Chrono Trigger came out, or like a couple months earlier, Chrono Trigger came out, and I remember like being able to buy. I was allowed for some reason to pick out any game. It wasn't like for, it might have been for my birthday, like a late birthday present or something, but it wasn't like a Christmas gift. It was like I was just able to pick out one Super Nintendo game, and it was between Chrono Trigger and Yoshi's Island, and I think our parents might have put pressure on me to choose Yoshi's Island because obviously, you were like 4 years old. You were not going to be playing Chrono Trigger.
Right.
And so, I kind of like begrudgingly bought Yoshi's Island. But what's crazy to me is that there was a time when you could choose between two games, and they were Chrono Trigger and Yoshi's Island, like two of the best games ever,
Right.
That was it was just a pretty amazing time. Yeah, I think, again, to me, I'm always going to look back at the Super Nintendo, and I know that everybody's experience is different. And with video games, like what you consider the greatest or the most important or the most evolved or whatever is heavily dependent on like what where you were playing your games, what kinds of games you were playing. Like I didn't grow up with PC games, so like there are people who were probably playing PC games in the early 90s who like did not get the Super Nintendo at all because it was like primitive compared to
I'm sorry, but PC games suck. PC games are like they were what mobile games are now. They just suck.
Yeah, I'm very biased. I was a Nintendo kid. Like I didn't have a Sega Genesis. I slightly looked down on people who did have Sega Genesis. So to me, the Super Nintendo, that was the pinnacle, and it really like solidified my interest in video games. That I think if I hadn't discovered the Super Nintendo, if I had just been like one of those, one of the people who had an NES and that was their first and last console, I would probably not still be playing video games today. But the Super Nintendo kind of like gave me something to grow up with. It showed me the sort of potential of video games to be, more than just kind of casual amusements. They could be works of art. They could have interesting stories. They could, just kind of like connect with me on a deeper level. And that's why I still play games today is basically because of the Super Nintendo and the PlayStation and the PS2, but mostly, at the root of it all is because of the Super Nintendo. So, I don't think we have an idea for a podcast yet next month. We have to talk about it, but I do have some other plans. So first of all, this month we've got, I think at this point our last post will have been a new Imaginary Genres video on sexually charged songs about cars. So if you haven't seen that, go to our YouTube channel, or actually, better yet, go to dystopiandanceparty.com and check it out. I worked really hard on that. I'm pretty happy with how that came out. We're going to have a dance mix on photography will be coming out. And that's about it for this month. Next month, another Imaginary Genres video, songs about Pikachu. So look forward to that, video game fans. And then, we're also going to have another installment of the Kanye West series.
We should probably mention that it's not actually songs about Pikachu. It's just songs that make very vague references to Pikachu.
True, but some of them are songs about Pikachu because they're literally songs from Pokemon soundtracks.
It's the stupidest thing.
Yeah, this one's gonna be fun to make because like the car video, I actually took some care in and tried to like add some historical perspective and actually like genuinely look at the ways in which cars have been used as like sexual metaphors. This video is just stupid. It's gonna be so fun to make. And it's also this fall is the 50th anniversary of the Monkees TV show and album, and so I'm writing a guide to the music of the Monkees. I don't know. I'm a Monkees expert. I'm a Monkeesologist. So I will finally be putting that expertise to good use for Dystopian Dance Party. If for some reason you listen to this podcast and you've never heard us before, we're pretty much incapable of striking when the iron is hot. So like this is our only, other than the Pikachu video, this is our only video game related content for a while. But if you like Super Nintendo and the Monkees, then this is the fucking website for you. So so yeah, dystopiandanceparty.com. We will come up with something to talk about on our podcast next month.
The Monkees.
And Yeah, maybe
could
we'll just
talk
do a
about-
monkeys podcast.
Right, we could talk about our experience with the monkeys.
So, anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next month.
Look at the birds. Flowers. It's wonderful. Sitting by the pond talking. I want to tell you a poem. Dr. Octagon, paramedic fetus of the east with priests. I'm from the church of the operating room with the strikes of force and scalpels since the Holocaust. I do indeed and greed, explore, meet the patients. Back in rooms with the nurse with the voodoo curse. Holding up office lights, standing at huge heights. Back and forth, left wing, swing to north. East and south with blood pouring down your mouth. I come prepared with the white suit and stethoscope. Listen to your heartbeat, delete, beep, beep, beep. Your insurance is high, but my price is cheap. Look at the land. Blue flowers, grown by the purple pond. See the polka dots. Blue flowers, growing by the purple pond. Yellow index. Blue flowers.